Test. Hello everyone. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I was asked recently and in the past a question regarding veganism and Buddhism. And I'm going to include in this vegetarianism as well. I've covered this topic in different ways in the past, but, well, it's 2020, so I respect the question, and I will answer it, hopefully in a slightly different manner, so that there's some clarity to this thinking. At the same time, I'm also thinking of questions that I've been asked by new subscribers to my YouTube channel regarding several things about Buddhism, things that they've heard either from other groups or the impressions they've gotten from other people, perhaps even interpretations they've gotten from reading different material, from sutras to commentaries to just books by any old author about Buddhism. There's a lot of information out there, so I don't fault any of you. But as I see it as my particular mission, if you will, my karma, my position in this life as a human, to mitigate misunderstandings between writings, old ones, new ones, groups, and what it is, quite simply, to be a practicing Buddhist in 2020. So, with that in mind, the subject at hand, so that I can narrow the focus of this particular video, because, well, just by the number of videos on my YouTube channel, I think one could get the impression that a great deal of discussion is needed to understand the vastness of Buddhism. I'm going to adjust my microphone here. Sorry if that made some noise. I've been dealing with equipment issues. So, the subject of veganism, vegetarianism, what we eat as Buddhists, most often revolves around the question of killing, taking a life, whether it is a beetle or a buffalo or another human. What's the deal? So, once again, as I often remind us, when we read the teachings of Buddha, commentary by Bodhisattva on the writings and sermons of Buddha, no writings, but the sermons of Buddha, and teachings through scholarship from Nagarjuna and before him, through Tendai and Dengyo and the whole lot, to Nichiren. And myself included, other contemporary scholars who offer their elucidations on the teachings. One of the primary points that I really, really, really want especially if you're new to Buddhism, please construct a filter in your head. Not a filter like you want to get out bad stuff, but a filter that helps you align your thinking to understand that when Shakyamuni Buddha first started teaching enlightenment, he got a lot of people looking at him like, huh? You have to remember, this was 2,500 or so years ago. People were just not that sophisticated. They hadn't been exposed to a lot of this kind of thinking. And so years of the early sermons of Buddha were a concerted attempt to turn people's minds inward just to understand the nature of what it was to really be human. Not just prancing along doing what you always do, but to really keenly observe even the mind itself, the nature of the mind. This is not something that was popular at the time. Spiritualism at the time was something that was put upon you. It was a layer of intellectualism and mysticism that was put upon you by a separate caste of people who were in charge of doing that. You didn't find it for yourself. You didn't, go on a path of discovery. This was a very, very rare activity for people to go on a sojourn to try to discover, I don't want to say fundamental natures of life, and the world around us, which at that time a universe was the world. It was, stars were part of the sky. They weren't. Anyway, I don't want to get off track. So there will be those who are reasonably read, and they will quote early translations of sermons of the earlier years of Shakyamuni Buddhist teachings, and they will quote the 255 precepts that we have to observe as bodhisattva, and all the rules and regulations of how to behave in the monastic order, and a lot of them will come across this thing of not eating meat, or cleansing one's body of all of these ideas of eating anything that once roamed, that was alive, quote unquote. Don't forget, though, with your modern understanding, certainly you understand that spinach is alive in its own way. So, without digressing too much, people who do this find quotes and are very keen to justify a lot of rules and behaviors assigned to Buddhism. They miss the mark. Over and over again, Shakyamuni cautioned his followers to not seize upon the words that he was using, and not even to seize upon him as a figure to worship. Don't do that. He was constantly reminding people that he was not an extraordinary thing to be worshipped, that he wasn't the source of your enlightenment, that your enlightenment doesn't come from the words that he spoke. It comes from understanding the meaning of what he was talking and teaching about, the meaning that his life itself was showing as an exemplar. And I say this to my students all the time. This is your enlightenment, your Buddhism, your enlightenment. You do it as much as you want it. It's yours. I can't give it to you. No one can give it to you. It doesn't come from a book. It comes from your effort. The teachings, the words, the sutras, the commentaries, me, anything that you ingest to understand Buddhism is a tool for you to attain it. All right? So with all of that in mind, understand that what Shakyamuni Buddha was teaching those early practitioners was not that killing is bad, but that they needed to understand from where these thoughts came into their minds. What does it mean to kill? What are the motivations to kill? And there are different parameters. For instance, to take the life of another human is to, and this is completely in concert with the thinking of Buddhism, to take the life of a human being is to disable them from discovering their own Buddha nature. This is a terrible cause, right? And to take the life of any living creature for the purpose of taking the life is just as heinous an act, because it bespeaks a deep, profound disrespect for what is life itself. And here we start to get closer to the meaning. Early rules and practices in monasteries involved a lot of asceticism, a lot of privations. If you want to understand the nature of hunger, deprive yourself of food to the breaking point. You will discover thoughts in your mind and body that you'd never understood or even thought existed in the past, because you were always satiated. In this way, Shakyamuni Buddha taught his students how to better understand their minds, the way their minds are. How do you go another day without eating? What goes on in your mind in order to control your body's metabolism, your feelings regarding food, ingesting food, the meaning of food. These are profound ideas that start to unlock, for the uninitiated, a path to a larger understanding, a larger picture of what their own mind is. What is the mind, right? It's not the brain, but we use the brain to connect with this mind. So what is this mind? What is it doing? Who controls it? And to what degree can I interact or control it, rather than the other way around? So, sex is another example of one of those intrinsic urges we have, right? So if we look at sex for a moment, in the monastery, sex was a rule, no sex. Why? Because there's hardly any more powerful a distraction in daily life than sex. Same as food. But we're human beings. Buddhism is a philosophy and a way, a methodology for living our human life as fully as we are potential to do so. And in order to do so, we need to remove those obstacles. What are the obstacles? They're mental obstacles. They're obstacles in the mind that keep us in animal behaviors rather than the great potential of our human understanding, perspective, insight, behavior. Now, if we didn't have sex or food, our species wouldn't last very long, would it? So Buddha wasn't saying you can never have sex and you can never eat meat. He was saying you need to profoundly understand what that means to support life. And here we start to get closer to the crux of it. Does your behavior support life, not just yours, but life as the hugest concept you could muster, or does it not? Does it work against life? Now we're talking Buddhism. There are stories of the Buddha being asked by a man. He said, look, we live in an arid area. There's not much vegetation. My ancestors, everyone in this region of the world, we hunt for food. We use every part of the animal. We have deep respect for an animal that we slaughter to use not only their meat and fat to feed our family and fill our lamps with oil so that we can have light and fire and cook. But we use the skins to clothe our children and ourselves. We use the teeth for tools. We use every part because we honor the animal. How is this killing against the practice of Buddhism? And Buddha would simply explain that it was not the act of killing that was the problem. It was the will to kill. I think the saying goes, it was enough to kill the will to kill. Sounds like a very westernized version to me. But you can understand, being a student of Buddhism, that what Shakyamuni Buddha was teaching was not that it is empirically bad to kill, but that if there was anywhere within the act of killing the desire, the fulfillment, the will to simply kill and take a life, then this was a problem. But if this life taken was honored in such a way as to promote the life of one's children, family, self, others, that this was an honorable kill. Not killing for a trophy on the wall, but killing for survival, for promulgation of the species. But this is very complicated. It's very easy to say, oh yeah, well that's why, we do that. But to deeply understand it requires some profound search, inward search, to find where these things are misshapen, misplaced, and whether they are at all really that needed. So back to the question about veganism or vegetarianism. In today's world, depending on where you live, we live in a world of abundance. And if you want to choose to be a vegetarian, by all means be a vegetarian. I will remind you, though, that if you really are a hardcore Buddhist, that anything that we ingest as human beings that has any nutritional value comes from something that in some way or other was living. Plants live. Especially if you're a Nichiren Buddhist, from the time Tendai opened up the Threefold Lotus teachings, we've understood that enlightenment is not only for sentient beings, but insentient beings. Now, this is a more difficult row to hoe, and I don't think I want to diverge that deeply into that in this video. How am I doing on time? I'm running down. So I may have to have a part 2 to this. I will conclude part 1 by saying to you that we have huge mechanisms in our world today for providing meat, fish, and animals that are raised and farmed specifically for the purpose of slaughtering and feeding the masses. You may have political, economic issues with that, and this is where veganism comes in. Veganism isn't so much about what you eat, but more about why you eat it. It's a lot more political, economical, and I have no problem with those things. Those are valid points, and I laud anyone who wants to take them on. Anything can be done to an extreme, of course. But simply on the issue of killing, I hope that I've made a valid point in part 1. And if I do a part 2, we'll try to elaborate on that, but I hope I've answered the question. Love you all. Thank you so much for your support. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Take care.